Hi everyone, it's Tarrant.
And Stella from Meeple University.
Today we'll be teaching you how to play the solo mode for Scarface 1920, game designed by Tony Serra de Sanferm and Daniel Simon, and published by Red Zen Games. You'll first need to learn the multiplayer rules, which we have in a separate video, and the link to that is in the description below, before you then learn the solo rules from this video.
Let's get to the game.
The solo mode of Scarface 1920 pits the player against an automated opponent known as the Enforcer. You'll be facing the Enforcer in a game played under two-player rules, and your aim is to earn more money than the Enforcer. Prior to setup, remove from the decks any cards that show this small black square next to the card type. These are not compatible with the solo mode. Also set aside a distillery owner and a gun runner from the dealer's deck for the Enforcer. Set up the main play area and your player area exactly as you would for an ordinary two-player game, with one exception. That is, when the time comes to draw jobs, you'll draw two jobs, look at them, and choose the one you wish to keep, setting the other one aside for the Enforcer. You'll then do this a second time and a third time to end up with your normal 3 starting jobs. Now pick your opponent and flip its board over to the solo mode side. Set up the boss figure, upgrade cubes, thugs, vehicles and control markers in the usual way. The Enforcer's crime marker starts at 1. Take the 7 numbered chits and place one randomly into each district. This will help to randomize the Enforcer's actions during the game. Randomly choose one of the remaining starter districts and then place an Enforcer control token, vehicle, and the square Enforcer token into that district. It doesn't matter which vehicle you place, Enforcer vehicles are all considered identical. Separate the solo mode cards into 3 piles, A, B, and C, and shuffle each of them face down. The A and B piles are set aside for now. It's the smaller C pile, which is the Enforcer's starting deck. Set down the Enforcer's 3 starting job cards, the 3 you rejected. It doesn't matter what these are, you'll simply be counting those to trigger other effects for the Enforcer. Lay the Enforcer's starting deals face up. If the Enforcer's starting neighbourhood requires only one type of goods, then its starting resources will be 2 of those goods. In all other cases, the Enforcer starts with 1 of each. Finally, take some non-player coloured cubes, and you'll be using these to track the Enforcer's actions. The Enforcer is the first player, and you're now ready to play. Player turns in the solo mode are no different to the multiplayer mode. All you need to know is how to play the Enforcer's turns. Like the players, the Enforcer has 2 types of turns. An action turn, which occurs if there are any cards remaining in the Enforcer's deck. And note that the Enforcer plays directly from a deck and has no hand. And a Reorganization turn when the Enforcer's deck is empty. To start an action turn, check the Enforcer's boss's location on the upgrade track. The number at the top represents the number of cards in the Enforcer's plan, and the number at the bottom represents the number of action cubes the Enforcer gets this turn. From left to right, flip over cards from the top of the Enforcer's deck up to the plan size, or stop short if the deck runs out. Next, count up all of the movement values in the top right corners. Here it would be a total of 1. Move the Enforcer token up through the numbered districts that many numbers. So here a movement of 1 would move from district 3 to 4. This is called the current district for Enforcer actions. The Enforcer does not increase crime by playing more than 2 cards in plan. Now it's time to resolve actions. First, you'll need to count up the Enforcer's power, represented by the fists, and this can be in the top left corners of these cards, or in the upgraded power stat on the board. In this case, the Enforcer has a total of 3 power. Power can be used as either muscle or influence, or a mix of both. In effect, it's used equally to resolve any of the Enforcer's orders. You'll then attempt to resolve each action in sequence, from left to right, top to bottom. If you find an action that is possible to resolve, then resolve it and mark it off with an action cube. If you find an action that's not possible to resolve, then skip over it and move to the next one. If the action you're checking has a number in its left column, then this is an action that requires a certain amount of power to resolve. And that number serves as a bonus or debit to the enforcer's ability to carry out that specific action. For example, the enforcer has 3 power to resolve this action, or 5 power to resolve this one. An action with a dash does not require power to resolve. You also skip over the action if it is valid to resolve but has no actual effect on the board. Continue checking and resolving actions in this way until the enforcer is either out of cubes or out of actions to check. You'll then finish the action turn by discarding all of the played action cards. Next, we'll talk about how the enforcer resolves each of its individual actions and orders, and this thematically will be quite similar to how the player does so. What's important is to work out where or how the enforcer takes actions. Often this will be outlined on the enforcer's cards, but at other times you'll have to follow a set sequence of prioritization steps. Most important among these is the neighbourhood selection criteria, as this impacts a lot of different orders. When choosing between equally valid neighbourhoods using the neighbourhood selection criteria, you will first choose the neighbourhood that has the highest profit, that is, the most money gained from a single sale. Ignore police cars. The enforcer never pays bribes. If tied, look at whether or not the neighbourhoods are supplied, that is, have enough goods present to make a single sale. And take into account any discount for the enforcer's vehicles that might apply. In this case, both of these neighbourhoods are fully supplied. Under the neighbourhood selection criteria, the next criterion is the neighbourhood which is not supplied, but which is closest to being supplied in the resource that you're currently looking at. So if this were an alcohol action, this district has a surplus of 1, this has a shortfall of 2, and this has a shortfall of 1. So if all 3 of these districts had the same profit, this one is closer to being supplied than this one, and so this would have the top priority. If you're still tied, then priority goes to the lowest numbered district. So, in summary, when choosing between neighbourhoods using the neighbourhood selection criteria, you'll first use the neighbourhood with the highest profit, then the neighbourhood that is closest to being supplied in the resources you're using, and then the neighbourhood in the district with the lowest number. There are also some actions prioritised under reverse neighbourhood selection criteria, and that is first the neighbourhood with the lowest profit, then the neighbourhood that is furthest away from being supplied, and then the neighbourhood in the district with the highest number. If you ever run out of ways to break a tie between enforcer options, then choose the one you prefer the most. Now to the individual orders. When the enforcer gains a job, simply draw the top card from the jobs deck and add it face down to the enforcer's collection. It doesn't matter what's printed on the card, all that matters for the enforcer is the total count of jobs. And in particular, more jobs means more money during a reorganization turn. When the enforcer reduces crime, simply move down 1 step per power. When the enforcer recruits, it does 1 step of recruitment per power. It always prioritises recruiting from safe houses to headquarters before slums to safe houses. When the enforcer rescues thugs from prison, they are returned to the headquarters as usual. The action card will describe how this action takes place, and it won't necessarily require the enforcer to have power. When the enforcer adds businesses to the board, it will add 1 business per power in its plan. Each business added is chosen among the basic 3 at random and placed according to neighbourhood selection criteria among the enforcer's controlled neighbourhoods. Note as well that if the enforcer is ever required to remove businesses from the board, it chooses among valid businesses in reverse neighbourhood selection criteria. When the enforcer hires an associate, find the associate whose number of stars is highest but still equal or lower than the amount of power in the enforcer's plan. if there's a tie, choose the leftmost associate. So in this case, if the enforcer had 1 or 2 power, they would take the crap shooter, 3 power, and they'd take the casino owner. The hired associate is simply added in a face-up pile. The enforcer won't use it, but will still gain $2 per star at the end of the game. You'll then level up the enforcer's deck by adding a random B card for a 1, 2 or 3 star associate, or A card for a 4 or 5 star associate. As a default, add the card to the enforcer's discard pile. Or if the enforcer can pay 1 alcohol for a B card, or 2 for an A card, then you'll always make that payment and put the card on top of the deck. We'll talk more about how the enforcer stores and spends its goods when we talk about the dealers. The enforcer still gets the family ring in the usual way and will gain money at the start of turns where it holds it. When the enforcer upgrades, it will attempt to upgrade the row corresponding to the current district. If that row is full, or the enforcer doesn't have the money or power to do the upgrade, then continue to the next row sequentially until you find a valid one. Then resolve the same way as the player. Move the cube over, gain the crime covered, and this new ability will be in effect going forward. The left side bonuses will grant money and additional A and B card bonuses in the same way as before. While with the exception of power, the right-hand bonuses work the same way for the enforcer as the players. A new nightclub is placed in a district the enforcer controls, and a new vehicle is placed in a district where the enforcer has presence. In both cases following the neighbourhood selection criteria. As in setup, it doesn't matter whether you place a car or a truck. Both of the enforcer's vehicles have the same abilities as car and truck. When the enforcer gains a dealer, simply take a dealer card from the top of the deck and place it face down into a new deal. All face down deals are treated as if they have a 1 thug limit, a 1 storage limit, and produce 2 guns or alcohol. The next order is to gain supply from deals, and this one works quite differently for the enforcer than the players. The enforcer must place a thug onto an empty dealer, but requires no power to take the action. The enforcer then gains the goods from all face-up deals, from all face-down deals, and any dealer's supply bonus. These are wild, and you'll always distribute the resources as evenly as possible between alcohol and guns, with 1 extra alcohol if necessary. Now it's time to store them. First you'll store on the enforcer's deals, alternating between guns and alcohol until you're out of empty deals. Then place remaining alcohol in the enforcer's unsupplied controlled neighbourhoods following neighbourhood selection criteria. And then once all are supplied, again determine a priority by neighbourhood selection criteria and place 1 alcohol per neighbourhood until you're out of alcohol to store. Follow those same 2 steps for the guns. Whenever the enforcer is to spend resources, you'll first spend it from the surplus of the enforcer's controlled neighbourhoods. Once there is no surplus, you'll spend from the neighbourhoods in reverse neighbourhood selection criteria order, and then as a last resort, we'll spend from deals. As for the players, selling to a neighbourhood may only come from that neighbourhood or from the deals. If the enforcer ever takes an action with a wild cost, then alternate between guns and alcohol, starting with guns. When the enforcer does a sell to neighbourhoods action, it may sell to as many neighbourhoods as the power in its plan. Neighbourhoods are chosen among controlled neighbourhoods which can be supplied in neighbourhood selection criteria order. Enforcer vehicles give a 1 resource discount in the usual way, and the enforcer never pays bribes to police. Otherwise, the spending of resources and gaining of money occurs in the usual way. When the enforcer sells to the authorities, it makes 1 sale per power and chooses the resources to sell in the usual spending order. And when the enforcer uses the authorities to remove control markers, it chooses among your markers in neighbourhood selection criteria order. To get thugs onto the Chicago map, the enforcer will use an action like this, and this will explain how many thugs to use compared with power, and will generally put them into the current district. To move its pieces, the enforcer will generally use an action like this. This will identify a destination district, again usually the current district, and then move one piece to that district per power in its plan. It will always first prioritise adjacent thugs, then thug vehicle combinations, and then vehicles. So if this had been a 3-power action, this thug would have been the first power, and these two would have been the rest of the movement. Once again, for both the purposes of placement and movement, the enforcer never pays bribes to police. If the enforcer has an action to seize one or more neighbourhoods, then look at all of the game states on the board and determine which neighbourhoods the enforcer is able to seize. Count all of the normal defences, remembering again that the enforcer's vehicles count as both cars and trucks. And if the enforcer's power is enough to make up the difference, then the enforcer can seize the neighbourhood. If there are multiple valid targets, the enforcer will first prioritise your neighbourhoods over the neutral ones, then prioritises the most profitable neighbourhood, and then the one with the highest defence. If the enforcer's draw deck is empty, then it takes a reorganization turn, which works very similar to the player's reorganization. The enforcer sells into all its neighbourhoods in the usual way, and gains $3 for each of its controlled businesses in the usual way. Then count up the enforcer's number of jobs and multiply it by the number of news article cards in the active slot. The enforcer now steals that much money from the human player. Then do all the other usual steps. Retrieve thugs from the board and prison. Recruit thugs according to its recruiter's value. Reshuffle the draw deck. And advance the time marker. When the game is over, the enforcer will gain money for leftover businesses and stars on hired associates in the usual way. If you've earned more money than the enforcer, then you win the game. And that's how to play Scarface 1920 The Solo Rules. We hope you enjoyed this video.
If you find this video useful, please help us by hitting the like button. Subscribe to us. You can also hit the meeple in the corner to do so, and hit the bell icon so you'll know when we have new videos. You can also follow me on Instagram for my board games journey.
Comments, suggestions and feedback are all welcome in the comments section below.
Thanks for watching. See you next time.